it be wonderful if we could teach the gullible to never be so comfortable with lies they eat like comfort food? To disregard the bogus claims and pseudoscientific claims. Can you imagine just how much indeed the world would change? No more political predators playing on the populace, but ilkas and plots to shift and kill metropolis. No more villains with the title in the Bible, holding phony temperatures like the stuff they teach is vital. Imagine it was no one left to prove a claim you make. And folks really feel ashamed expressing content that was fake. It's not to say we never make mistakes, it's just to say we go out of our way to show the evidence it takes.
Remain skeptical while you travel the road of reason. Stay strapped with logic and facts. That's what it is, yo. Keep reality intact to help the truth grow. Question every claim, especially the ones you believe in. Remain skeptical while you travel the road of reason.
Hi everyone, this is Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, and my name is Kayla. I'll be your host today, and this is C.J. Duncan Arauz. I learned how to pronounce his name today, and he is a co-host, and this is his last show today, so definitely gonna miss him. So today we're going to be interviewing Ryan J. Bell. He's a Seventh-day Adventist pastor turned atheist, and he blogged his experience about that. But before we do so, we'd like to go ahead and talk about some things. First, whenever you want to watch us, you can always watch us live on Ustream at Sundays at 3 o'clock. We are also, if you're local in the Fairfax area, you can watch us on Channel 36 live at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. All of our shows are on YouTube, so if you look up Road to Reason TV, you'll be able to find us there. Just like our shows, if you've watched it live, then it never hurts to go to the YouTube channel and comment and tell us what you think. And you can always visit our Facebook page to hear more about what's happening, get updates on what's happening on our show. And before we go on, I wanted to go over one of my favorite points. The Hotline Project is a call-in line that allows people to call in if they're having doubts about their religion and their faith. It's not a deconversion hotline, but if you call the Hotline Project 844-368-2848, you'll be able to get information about religions in general and reaching out to the atheist community. So today we have a special, we have a joke for us today. You want to tell us a joke?
Sure, let's do this.
Okay.
So, why does church does not offer free Wi-Fi?
I don't know. Cheap?
Not that cheap, but it could be because they do not want to struggle with an invisible power that actually works.
I really liked, what is a dyslexic, an agnostic, what does a dyslexic, agnostic, insomniac do?
I don't know.
They stay awake all night wondering if there really is a dog. Okay, so we were talking before the show for our Atheist News today about Stephanie Gutterson. She's she's actually a local atheist activist. She also has a YouTube channel that she's been getting some attention about.
Yeah, she recently appeared at the Young Atheist Convention right here at George Mason University, talking about pseudosciences and things that people believe that they shouldn't.
Yeah, that's how I got to know who she was. I subscribed to her YouTube channel and came across her video that's actually stirring up the controversy. The video is a video about, I have to get his name again. Yeah, the video is actually about Adam Miller. He is a faith healer, and she criticizes some of his work. And specifically, she criticizes some of his statistics, the fact that he only backs up, the efficacy of his work with testimonials, and just calls out the fact that this kind of mentality of instead of going to a cancer specialist to get your cancer cured, going to a faith healer, because that's on his list of things that he says that he can heal. And so after the criticism, a couple months later, he finds this video and decides to sue her for slander because she calls him a con artist and for copyright infringement. Although if you watch the video, it's clearly under fair use. She does not use a lot of her videos. I can't see why it wouldn't be classified as fair use. So what do you think about this issue? We talked about this.
No,
before
like
the show.
First, I want to let people know that whenever we have claims, especially medical claims, we have years and decades of strategies to be able to determine which strategies actually work.
Yeah.
We have randomized controlled trials. We have so many different strategies that allow us to see, especially stuff like cancer, how to cure cancer. We know how to find out which strategies work for that. If he is willing to claim that this faith healing that he practices can cure stuff as cancer, we have methods of determining that. He's not willing to do so, and personally I think that because he's full of it and he actually knows that it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. But if he wants to demonstrate that his faith healing does work, we have methods of doing it. So do not allow yourself to believe stuff without any evidence, especially when it comes to the health of yourself and people that you actually care about.
And the thing that gets me about the situation, she calls him a con artist.
Yeah.
And as soon as he finds out that she calls him a con artist, he goes onto his website and completely changes his website. You're in the tech industry, so I just found out that you can actually see previous websites and how they were set up. But he literally edits everything that almost everything that Stephanie criticizes in his work.
His credentials?
Yeah, his credentials. He said that he had a degree in metaphysics and religion, like a doctorate in metaphysics and religion from this, I forgot what it was, but it was a degree farm. And Stephanie pointed that out, and all of a sudden it's gone on his website, and now he says that he has credentials in psychology and medicine in general. And at one point in this website, he says he has credentials, he's certified for EMT, and that's short for emergency medical technician. So you would say, I believe you would say I am a medical emergency technician, as opposed to I'm certified in emergency medical technician. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would actually say that, but it just sounds, it's pretty obviously fraud. Like, he's a fraud.
And if you're skeptical of any of this, as you should be, you could check it out yourself. Just head over to Google, search for his website. Google is very good at caching websites. You can see the caches of all the previous versions of the website that he has. Yeah. So you could check it out for yourself.
Yeah, and I think the issue that bothers me the most is he's suing. He actually dropped the libel. Mm-hmm. He dropped from what I had read, he dropped the accusations of her slandering him. And now he's only going on this fair use. Another thing that he did, so Stephanie is a trans mm-hmm. woman, and he basically, in his rebuttal video to what she was saying, about half the video was about her being trans, mm-hmm. and literally calls her out and says, this so-called Stephanie, she's had her name changed. Yeah. Legally, she is a woman named Stephanie, and her old name is, she's not who she was anymore. It's completely irrelevant to the topic. It was completely just bashing her for no reason. And it's funny because in the video one of the biggest things that she pointed out was the fact that you cannot prove the efficacy of your work through testimonials. That's not proof. And so the entire rebuttal video is all these people standing up and saying, no, he did heal me, and all of his clients giving more testimonials. He obviously doesn't. I don't even know where he's coming from. You'd think that you would try harder to address an issue. He's definitely
But
I don't know.
If you have culturally not relied on the scientific methods of being able to verify the work that you have, what other way would you have? He, in his mind, probably does not see any other way than to slander and diminish the character of Stephanie Gutterson. Yeah. So what I see here is all the different strategies that he uses to lower her character.
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to mention, she does have some real needs right now because he is trying to sue, and fair use, although it is a thing, it's kind of a vague thing, and so people can still sue you for copyright infringement even if you fall clearly under fair use, although they might not win. So she is being sued. He did follow through on his threats. She does have a GoFundMe campaign. Typically, I look up her GoFundMe campaign. I don't have an exact address here. Typically, I look it up by typing in Google GoFundMe and then sued by faith healer. And then one of the first things will come up is Stephanie's page. So you can go ahead, you can go ahead and support her. However, so if that's something, if you feel the need to do that.
Yeah,
we're not necessarily saying go and do that, but it's a page that's out there. So
yeah, when it comes to copyright, judges have a lot of discretion on to what they can determine to have fair use. Even though we have certain guidelines, they have discretion among those guidelines to be able to determine what is fair use. So due to that, lawyers are able to, argue both sides of the issue. So
you're in the tech industry, and we've had discussion in the past about fair use and copyright. You don't believe that there should be copyright?
I do think that it hinders creativity among people. Yeah,
especially with the internet age. So do you know a lot about the fair use rules?
I am no lawyer. I just know enough to be able to talk about the topic, but I wouldn't call myself an expert.
Okay. Yeah, me neither. I do a YouTube channel, so I kind of pay attention to what's out there, and I've read a lot of the copyright, rules, but it's very clearly based off of the basic things that I've read. She's not doing anything different than any other YouTuber that I've seen.
Yeah, she's making commentary on his content, and that usually among judges would fall into fair use. It has in the past been able to, other judges have considered that fair use. So we'll see if the judge and the president will follow precedent.
We should be able to criticize people for bad information. He should have been called out long before that. His numbers keep changing. She pointed out at first, because she found a video with statistics on it that he had given. First of all, it wasn't like clear statistics. It was 15,000 plus people that he has seen in 30 years. Then there's another video that says 16,000 in plus. He always puts a plus on there. I don't know why he wouldn't put clear statistics if he really believes in his product. In 36 years, his information keeps changing too, in his percentage rates and stuff. I guess it's pretty clear that he's a charlatan. It just blows my mind that people would believe something so obviously not true.
Well, have in mind that a lot of people do believe that God exists. They also believe that miracles happen, and they believe that people have performed miracles in the past. So having all these preconcepts, it shouldn't surprise us that there will be people that will believe that in the present there would be people that heal through faith.
Yeah.
And we see evidence of all over the country, people do flock to faith healers because they are desperate to be healed.
Yeah.
So
that's hard.
It is hard, and the best thing that we can do is, us personally, is let people know, hey, these people are charlatans. Don't let yourself take your money away or your ability to get healed through actual demonstrable medicine.
We're about to go to the PSA in a minute, but one thing that I wrote, because I do have a YouTube channel that I'm not going to promote here just because I'd rather keep that separate at the moment. But one of the things that I said is the reason why math teachers ask their students to show their work is so that they can see that their students know what they're talking about, or they didn't cheat. If they don't show their work, they might have gotten it right, but they might not get the next problem right because they don't know how to do it. And it's really important when someone makes a claim to ask them to show their work. At any rate, we're going to go to some PSAs now, and we'll be back in a minute to talk to Ryan Bell.
In Dublin, Georgia, it is reported that in one of the city's middle schools, teacher Nancy Perry informed her class that President Obama was not a Christian, and that if any of the parents of the children in the classroom supported him, they must not be Christians either. This didn't sit too well with at least one set of parents who requested a meeting with local school officials. When the meeting took place, it consisted of the parents, the teachers, a representative of the school, and the teacher's husband, who additionally happens to be a member of the local school board. That alone would bring into question any impartiality that might come out of the meeting. But it also happens that Bill Perry is a local conservative talk show host who frequently voices his opinions on such topics. The city's school superintendent has issued statements indicating that things are under control and that the teaching staff has been counseled regarding expressing their personal views on highly charged topics. But the parents are yet to be satisfied, and it seems that efforts to involve the NAACP and ACLU might be underway. For the Perry's part, they claim that the statements attributed to her were exaggerated or untrue, and that she plans to retire next year anyway. We suspect that there will be more to come on this story.
It's good. Homemade noodles. Marty, stop it. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. It reminds me, I've been thinking maybe we should try a new form of birth control. I heard about this one. It's called the IUD, intrauterine device. Or we could try the patch on your arm. Actually, I think that one goes in your butt.
Bedsider.org has birth control information and a lot more. And it's...
What do you think then? Arm or the butt?
There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, on Fairfax Public Access every Sunday. Each week the hosts tackle wishful thinking, religion, pseudoscience, and the harm they cause, with a combination of facts, humor, and community involvement. They challenge believers to defend their faith and give you, the skeptic, a voice. With live call-ins for viewers and streaming on the World Wide Web, there's never a dull moment. Don't wait. Look at them now on Facebook and YouTube, and remember to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, or there'll be hell to pay.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
Hi, may I please have an application? Thank you.
Skip the drama. Get your diploma.
Okay.
Take that first step towards a better future. Find free adult education classes at finishyourdiploma.org.
Hi, so we are back and we're going to be talking to Ryan Bell. Ryan Bell is a former Seventh-day Adventist pastor turned atheist. He blogged his deconversion experience on the blog Year Without God. So if anybody wants to go ahead and take a look at that blog, his website is yearwithoutgod.com, I believe. He's a compassionate heart and an activist in the skeptic community in general who lends his experience with theology and ministry to minister to the homeless in California as a director of community engagement at People Assisting the Homeless, which is a nonprofit organization over there. We're really proud to have him on our show. So, hi, Ryan. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on the program.
Thank you so much for being here. I can't say that enough. So, the first thing that we'd like to go over is probably just the basic blanket, what you get out of interviews. What happened? So, you were a pastor, and you said 19 years you were a pastor. What happened that made you start doubting your faith? And tell us just a brief story about your process. Give you 5 minutes for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a long journey. It started probably the minute I began my ministry after college. In school, like probably any subject that you learn in school, you learn sort of the abstract, the sort of the in a perfect world, this is what you think and do. And then the minute you get out into the real world, say if you studied business and you learn like this is how businesses work and this is how accounting works, and then you get out in the real world and you realize people don't quite do what you tell them to do all the time, or they don't, the business doesn't run exactly the way you learned in school. So for me, theology didn't fit exactly the way I learned it in school. There were people who were going through their own process and they didn't believe exactly what I thought they should believe. And so from day one, I had to learn how to do theology, really, which is a specific type of philosophy, I would say, which is focused on the question about God and how we as human beings relate to God. So from the very beginning of my ministry, from 1994 onward, I was in the process, it seems to me, of adapting my beliefs to fit the world as I experienced it. The people in the world, the experience of community and injustice and crisis in the world. So, for me, it was a very dynamic process. I learned theology as a very concrete thing that's very nailed down, very, sort of hermetically sealed. But then you get out into the real world and you have to unseal that. Otherwise, it's just, a lot of people don't, right? A lot of fundamentalists never unseal that package and they just go through life with this very tightly controlled system of beliefs and theology, and people be damned, But for me, it was much more, I had to incorporate people into my world. So that started years ago, and it just got, the tension between my beliefs and my experience of the world just grew over time, to the point where I kind of grew my way right out of the church.
Did you have specific questions that you were having problems with that made it hard? I know that you had that airtight theology, but what exactly were you confronted with that made you stop and say, hey, like, why does the Bible say this if this is not how people function, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the big tipping point for me was the church's relationship to gay and lesbian people. When I moved to Hollywood, well, even before I moved to Hollywood, I was a pastor in the suburbs of Philadelphia in Bucks County, and I had one or two closeted gay people in my church, and it was then that I first started to confront, well, how do we, on the one hand, I'm told I should love everyone the way I see in the Bible Jesus loves everyone. On the other hand, there are these texts that say the homosexuals are an abomination. So both can't be true. Like, I can't live with both of those. So I started to adjust. And when I moved to Hollywood, of course, there was a much larger gay community, and many of whom were part of my church. And I had to adjust my theology to account for, which at that time was just gay and lesbian members. Right as I was finishing up my tenure as a pastor, a transgendered woman joined our church, and she's actually now a leader in that church. That church has gone on to continue to be very progressive. But I finally came to the place where I couldn't bend the Bible anymore to account for the existence or acceptability of LGBT people. I just found that the Bible really wasn't open to their acceptance and inclusion, and that was a real stress point for me.
Did you find yourself fighting with yourself about your fundamentalist beliefs? Like, why do you think that you were so willing to make those kind of like, hey, like, this should be okay? Like, what made you make those kinds of concessions as opposed to just say no, like the Bible says? Because I was more of a Bible says kind of Christian.
Right. It's a fascinating question, and I'm not sure I know for sure. Like, I think that part of it might be temperament and personality. Like, I think some people are much more black and white, concrete thinkers. It's either, everything in the world is either a 0 or a 1, and they see the world in that binary way. And I guess I just always, not always, but I came to see the world as much more nuanced than that. people were not either 0 or 1. They were on a whole range of issues, experiencing the world quite differently than me. And I guess I had this innate desire to understand people. I'm curious about people. I love interacting with people. I find diversity, though sometimes incredibly challenging, I find it inspiring. It challenges me. So, and I guess I was just fortunate to be in fellowship and community with a group of people who also valued those things, and so I learned it from them. And here's the other thing. I guess I really took Jesus seriously as I read about him in the Bible. And here was a person, according to the Bible, who was constantly breaking traditional religious norms in order to accept unacceptable people. And the woman at the well who was a Samaritan, he wasn't supposed to talk to her, but he did. The woman who was supposedly caught in adultery, who he wasn't supposed to tolerate, but he actually condemned the condemners rather than condemning her. So there are, the Good Samaritan story. There's all these stories where Jesus is constantly saying to the righteous, the good religious people, you have no idea what God is all about. You want to condemn people and put people in boxes. And I'm here to tell you that the world is much bigger than that, much more expansive than that.
So Jesus was...
Of course, that's not all that's in the Bible, but that part of it really captured my imagination.
So Jesus was a bleeding heart hippie liberal.
I think so.
Cool.
Yeah, so you were starting to have these beliefs that allowed you to help your church move along a more progressive way. But is this the thing that started your challenge to yourself this year without God, or was it something else?
Well, I mean, what really started the challenge for me was losing my job at the church. So
how did that
after
happen?
19 years...
Sorry.
What's that?
How did that happen? But you already are going to start talking about how that happened, so...
Yeah. So after 19 years, I mean, I think I had pushed the envelope as far as it could go with my denomination. And I had been called in on the carpet a few times for any number of things, from the LGBT issue to pluralism and interfaith involvement. We had a close relationship with the mosque down the street. So finally push came to shove, and I had one of these truth days with my boss, and he asked me all sorts of questions, and I just told him I was going to tell him the truth about everything. And at the end of that, we eventually both agreed that I wasn't really a Seventh-day Adventist pastor anymore. So I lost my job, and in the intervening 9 months, from March 2013 up to the point when I started Year Without God at the end of 2013, I was really searching for what to do. Not just in the big picture kind of stuff, but really practical, like, will I go to church? Will I still go to church? And if so, where? Do I want to read the Bible all the time now that I'm not a pastor? How do I want to spend my weekends? That kind of thing. And so I started trying out different churches. Nothing really fit for me, for some really important reasons. Like, I just didn't think that the churches were focused on the right thing or the right issues. And I just bailed on it all. I said, I just need a time off. Like, maybe I was sort of like a rebound relationship. Like, sometimes you just need a break, to kind of clear the system. So I took that break, and by the end of the year, the one door that I hadn't opened to see what was inside was this door that basically had the sign on it that said, there isn't a God. That was one question that had been nagging me for probably 5 years, that I had not really had the mental space, given that I was a pastor and shepherding a congregation, to explore that. And I thought, well, now's the time. I don't have a church. I'm not really accountable to any ecclesiastical authorities. They're going to, kick my butt if I don't say the right thing. And so I thought, well, now's the time. And so I said, let me just take a year and really explore this question about whether or not there is a God. And let me look at the world through the lenses of someone who says there isn't a God. What does the world look like to a person who says, I don't believe that there's a God? I wanted to try to understand that worldview.
It seems like you were the kind of person who wanted to put yourselves in the shoes of other people too, which, I mean, you seem like a very compassionate heart, and it's an amazing thing to have. And you had some struggles against the compassionate heart, bleeding heart, liberal hippie side of you that really just wanted to love people. And these rules that were set up that didn't really make sense. And it seems like, you know, that was just another step of putting yourself into other people's shoes. You know, I find that very relatable. You know, that was the problem that I had. You know, I had a hard time, you know, relating those two things. So,
the question that I have now is, when you started the year without God, do you have any expectations of how it would end at the end of the year? Like, you're an atheist now. Was that even in the realm of possibilities for you when you started it?
It was in the realm of possibility. I think you know, the way I try to describe it is at the beginning of the year, I still believed in God, but I had this strong suspicion that there wasn't a God. But I really wanted there to be a God. So if there was a goal to my project, it was, number one, to understand the world from the perspective of an atheist. But it was also to see for myself, like, is there a God, you know, that I'm praying to all this time, or that I'm reading the Bible, that whether it's literal or not exactly literal, somehow God was involved in, you know, giving us this book, if that's true. Yeah, it was. I mean, I didn't think that I didn't have a clear expectation where I would end up. I was a little concerned that I might end up as an atheist, but I really just wanted to know the truth. You know, I really wanted to know what was possible to know, and what was important. You know, because I started the blog. If you remember back to the very first post, my very first sentence of that very first post was, "What difference does God make?" And that was a really important question to me. Like, even if there is a God, does it matter? So, for example, the God of deism. Let's say if somebody wants to believe in God, there's certainly room for them to do that. Like, you could just say, God exists, but he's outside of the realm of observable science, and he's sort of in the background of everything, making everything that is observable possible. And I can't refute that argument. But at the same time, I don't find that God makes any difference in my life. So I really wanted to know that as well.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, when it comes to science and theory, and, you know, good theories make a difference. Good theories come out with actual new data. You know,
and new predictions that can be eventually tested with. You make predictions based
off of things, and what does even a deistic God make predictions about? Like, what is that going to help us with necessarily? I mean, it gives us an answer, but we could put an answer in anywhere. I mean, we could call it, say that something else did it, and it would still be an answer, and not that it does anything for us, that answer. So, but yeah, I definitely relate to that a lot. Did you find yourself surprised by the atheist community, or did you find what you were expecting out of it, or did you think we were all a bunch of like mean people who were shaking our fist at God and churches? What was your perspective change on that, if you had one?
Yeah, no, it was. I really did go into this year almost like an anthropologist, so I was really paying attention to that question. Excuse me. And I found, probably unsurprisingly, that the atheist community has the range of personalities and people that any community would have. There are the compassionate, thoughtful ones. There are people who are angry, and probably rightly so. You know, some people have been more hurt by religion than others, and I think the more hurt, like literally hurt by religion, people are, the more I think they're entitled to, you know, I mean, we're all entitled to whatever emotions we have, but I understand why some people are quite angry. Some were mean to me from the beginning. Some atheists were. They thought I was, you know, playing games, you know, that this was a stunt. And now looking back, I understand why they might think that too. So I don't entirely blame people for that. On the other hand, there were majority of the atheists that I encountered were very welcoming. I think excited that they might get one for the team, you know. So they were sort of rooting for me to become an atheist, probably. And I sort of instinctually resisted that because I didn't want to be recruited by Christians, and I didn't really want to be recruited by atheists either. Like, if I was going to become an atheist, it wasn't going to be because some celebrity atheist wanted me to become one, any more than I would stay a Christian just because some important Christians wanted me to stay Christian. I really wanted to have my own process. So people were all over the map, and by and large, I just tried not to judge them for it. I just tried to understand, why is that person responding to me in that way, and what can I learn about from that, you know?
I also have some questions about the project itself, The Year Without God. So there are so many different ways that you could explore being an atheist, but this particular forum, a very public Year Without God blog, what was it that attracted you to this particular form of exploring atheism?
It's very public.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been pretty public with my views. I've been, blogging for probably 13, 14 years. At that point, I had a Huffington Post blog for about 4 years. And so, I mean, part of what got me in trouble with the church denomination that I was a part of was my blogging and my airing of my views publicly. So it was pretty customary for me to sort of incite discussion, if you will, by saying things publicly. The process itself was not super thought out. It was, I knew that I wanted it to be both personal and intellectual. So I wanted to reflect on my own feelings and my own experiences of a loss of faith and a crisis of faith. But I also wanted to do the work of reading. And because I sort of lean journalist, if I have an inclination, I gave a high priority to meeting people, talking to them, asking them questions about their experience of religion and losing their faith. I went to the American Atheist Convention. I went to TAM in Las Vegas last year. I just met a lot of people and talked to them about their reasons. And I just discovered, that there are a lot of people that have lots of reasons for not believing in God.
Yeah.
And there are almost as many reasons to not believe in God as there are people who don't believe in God. So I really tried to execute the whole thing on sort of two tracks. One was personally, like, what am I feeling? What does my gut tell me? What am I experiencing in myself? And then what am I reading in the literature?
Yeah. And it seems like you kind of dove in head first. And because of that, you're kind of, not only are you fresh into, I guess, the boat of the atheist community, but you're also somebody who has not only come in, but you've come in kind of diving in head first, knowing all these people, meeting all these people, doing all these things, whereas a lot of people kind of slowly come away from God and do things a little bit slower than you did. So the atheist community, I'd like to ask you a little bit about what you think of it. We have our heroes, people that we think are deserving of interviews such as these. I guess you're a hero of our community. It's an odd way to say it. But as a religious leader, I'm sure that you realize that any community will have its leaders. Do you think that the way that the atheist community thinks about our leaders is different than the way that the religious community thinks about its leaders? And what are those differences, if you see that any, or similarities as well?
That's a really good question. I think it's not as different as atheists would like it to be. Mm-hmm. I mean, what I hear a lot is from the atheists in the blogosphere is, well, we don't have authorities the way religious people do. We don't have a pope. We don't have a, archbishop of whatever. We just have people who are using their brains, and we're all independent, and we make decisions for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I get I get the appeal of that. I like to think of myself that way too. If I'm being honest, I am influenced by what other people think. I'm especially influenced by people who have spent a lifetime studying something more than I have. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not a scientist, and so when it comes to science, I don't have a lot to offer. But I'm very interested in listening to what experienced scientists have to say about their area of specialty. I think that the atheist community can be a little bit blind to its leaders, its heroes. And one of the things that just endlessly frustrates me is the way that we can't allow our atheist heroes to be both right and wrong at the same time. You know, that someone like Richard Dawkins can be right about an enormous number of things and wrong about some things too. Or maybe not even wrong, but just that I disagree with him about some things. I don't have to hate him or block him on Twitter or think that he's a monster because I disagree with him about a few things.
Yeah.
I can listen to him as a rational human being. I can sort through what he says, and I can say, wow, this 90% I think is really on the money, and I've learned a great deal from Richard Dawkins. These things, I think, you know, he's not a specialist in those areas, that he's sharing his opinion, and I happen to think I disagree with him, or he either said it in a really bad way that I wish he had said it differently. And I don't know why we have such a hard time with sort of sorting through the sound bites and saying, this I like, this I don't like, this I like, this I don't like. So, I mean, because we're all that, right? I mean, there's nobody on the planet that I agree with all the time, except for myself. And even then, I don't agree. I mean, half of the time I say something and then I think, wait, do I really think that? I'm not sure I really agree with what I just said.
Then someone
So,
comes up with
you know, I just think we need to do better
I never thought of that
at
before.
keeping our heroes kind of where they belong.
Yeah. I think that too. You know, I've seen a bit of that. I think me personally, I've tried very hard to be a skeptic and not just an atheist. You know, in my personal life, I find my skepticism is driven by the desire to have truth, and I don't ever want to be the kind of person who doesn't have a desire to have truth. I mean, that's the only reason I left my religion, was because I realized, like, you know what? Truth and God are not the same thing. I have to choose one or the other, and I can't believe in something that's not true. And so I think that I wish that, yeah, I do see that sometimes in the community. I also see, you know, the people that I'm around are typically not necessarily that way. But I do definitely understand. I see what you're saying. So,
like, I cannot help to wonder that what you just described, Ryan, it's an effect of how when people become atheists, whatever has a tinge of religious or theistic,
reactionary.
Yeah, people want to reject that, even if in essence it doesn't have to be something that is religious, but because this idea of, well, we aren't incapable of being experts in all fields, so let's allow other people to be experts in a field and let's listen to them. But because giving that type of authority to someone is what some people might consider something that religious people would do, they would immediately react to that. That in of itself shouldn't be something religious, but I can't help but wonder if people react that way because they do think it is religious.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into my next question. I've heard you say that you work closely with religious communities because you do work with a nonprofit that helps the homeless. And you have a heart for, you know, you do have a rational way of thinking about religion. You're not against religion necessarily. So what do you think that the atheist community can learn from religion? What do you think do you still feel an appeal? These are two questions, but do you still feel like an appeal for some of the aspects of religion that you feel like our community doesn't have?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think really the only part of religion that I have a hard time with is the idea of a supernatural being who's given us an infallible book, that dictates things, you know, that often make us into bad people. So, I mean, I think the idea, one of the things that I think about religion that's very appealing and that does correlate with my work with the homeless is that historically religious communities have been very good at organizing themselves to make a positive impact on the world. They've also been good at organizing themselves to make a negative impact on the world. I realize that. But you know, the history of hospitals, for instance, arises out of sort of the Christian community in ancient Rome, that they were the only people that were interested in looking after sick people and touching them and being around them. So I think that there is a history, but also an impulse within religion to say, let's all get together and make a larger impact than just one of us could make by ourselves on some social problems that are, let's face it, much bigger than any one of us. And I think the atheist community is doing that too. You have organizations like Foundation Beyond Belief that's beginning now to attract attention and really get some traction with organizing skeptics and non-believers into social action, charity work, donating money to good causes, disaster relief, and things like that. That's historically been the arena of religion. It doesn't need to be, but I think a religion has a sort of a head start on understanding how that works, how we motivate people to tap into their empathy and their compassion and move them to action. I just think we can learn a lot from that kind of stuff without being defensive about it. Like, we don't have to hate religion. We can say, no, that religious people have a history of getting some of this stuff right, and we don't need God in the picture for us to be able to do that sort of work.
Yeah. I have a really hard time. I recently deconverted. I guess this last year was kind of my year without God experience. But, you know, I miss so much about religion. You know, I was in a very close community and people took care of me and I took care of other people. You know, I stayed up one night, literally all night, praying with a friend who was having like suicidal thoughts. You know, and you can't, I don't see that you get that closeness that I had with the community other places. I mean, I found places where I can get those things, but it's kind of a sporadic, I get certain things some places and certain places other places. I think one thing that I have on my heart, and I'm trying to figure out what to do about it, where we can actually create that kind of community. But the problem is that, you know, nobody likes to do anything that religion does because they're anti-religion, or they feel that religion does everything wrong. This is black and white thinking, and I'm just like, no, religion does a lot of really great things too. Really great community.
Well,
I like singing on Sunday. I still sing church songs sometimes because they're uplifting and wonderful.
I've heard them, yeah.
Oh.
I think that's really important. And I mean, I think one teaching of Christianity that I find very compelling is this idea that we belong to one another, that we are in some way accountable to each other, that we're not islands, we're not individuals all by ourselves. I think what the skeptic community does a really good job of is emphasizing that we are individuals and that we do have choices and that we don't have to follow blindly a mass of people. So I think the truth is probably somewhere in between. We are autonomous individuals and we ought to celebrate that, but we also have to realize that we are in this together, and if one of us is suffering and we're connected to that person relationally, then we suffer too. And that idea of being a body, of being like, I'm the arm and you're the hand, and if the hand hurts, the arm probably hurts too, kind of thing. I think that's a concept that's not required, you know, it's not exclusive to religion. Humanism can teach us that like the fact that we're human beings connects us to each other. And I think we need to tap into that a lot more.
We need to extend that to beyond your in-group, out-group. You know, it's very easy for human beings to be tribal and to think in-group, out-group in that with those perspectives. But I think that we do also have the ability to extend that beyond our small little groups. But we have to be trained to do that because that's not how we human beings evolved. You know, we evolved to survive within our little tiny groups in that way. But like, yeah, that's the biggest thing that I had a problem with, was the in-group was so small. You know. And getting smaller usually, because the more it gets pressed from the outside, it just gets smaller. And it gets smaller and more like, no, everybody else is going to hell. I was a part of a religious organization, the ICOC, International Church of Christ. It was very much like, I mean, they were great in a lot of ways too. You've heard of them? I don't know if you've heard of them. I think so. Yeah, they had some issues way back in the early 2000s with their church. They were a lot more of a control religion back then. Now they're not so much. I would classify them as kind of a lighter control religion now. You know, I don't like saying cult because that's kind of like people think black and white in their head about it. But no, I think that different religions have levels of control, and you call it a cult when it's way over at this end. But at any rate, so I still have a lot of fears too because of the way that we thought about this in-group, out-group, everyone's going to hell. So that leads into my other question. So are you still afraid of anything that you were taught? Or do you still have some habits that you have a hard time, do you ever accidentally pray to God about things, or have any habits that you are finding hard to break? You know, I was never what my colleagues or my church folk might have called a prayer warrior. Like, I was never like a super duper prayer person in the sense of like on my knees for hours a day. But,
the more I've thought about it in the last 2 years, the more I realized that I prayed more than I thought I did.
Yeah.
I sort of went throughout my day just sort of relating to God. It would almost be like if you had an open cell phone channel to your loved one all the time. And as you're going through the day, you might not talk all the time. There might be long stretches of silence, even hours. But you would, if something cool happened, you might say, "Oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe what just happened," Or
it's like you were never alone in your head.
Yeah, and so I find myself drawn to praying, especially when someone I really love is going through a hard time. So, for example, if my girlfriend's under tremendous pressure at work or in her personal life for some reason, I feel helpless because there's nothing I can do physically to make that better. That's just sort of a circumstance that she's under. And in those circumstances, I would frequently call out to God and say, "God, just give this person a sense of peace, help them to have calm and to have the confidence to know that they can get through it." Or maybe even, I might even pray for the circumstances to change. So I don't so much pray for the circumstances to change anymore because I know that that's unrealistic. But I often will pray, if you want to call it that, or in my mind, think to myself, I hope Becca has peace tonight and can sleep well in spite of the stress that she's under. And I'm not saying it to anyone in particular, but it helps me feel like I've centered my thoughts towards her best interest. And whether there's a God or not who listens to that and does anything about it, I don't think so. But it doesn't matter to me. Like, I feel like that kind of expression of my heart is valid, even if it doesn't change anything in the outside world.
It does, though. It changes your actions. If you're thinking about someone, you're going to do something for someone, or you'll have that on your head. So if you do have the opportunity, you have more of a heart for it. I know that prayer always helped me do that. If I had somebody on my heart, I would be more willing to call them up or think about them and actually do something actively to help them out. So.
Yeah, I would encourage anybody who's deconverting not to be afraid of those moments, but to just be a student of them. So if you find yourself inclined to pray, even though you don't believe there's a God, instead of going, "Oh, I've got to stop that, I would think to myself, what does that mean? Like, what's actually going on for me right now?
What do you need out of this moment?
How can I learn? Yeah.
So I still have a fear, like, maybe you can give me some advice on this, but I still have a fear of hell. And I heard the Seventh-day Adventists are more nihilists. They don't believe in an eternal hellfire necessarily. Doctrinal stuff, I believed in an eternal hellfire. And so we are about to wrap up, but if you have any advice for anybody who's going through the fears involved in deconverting from religion, if you could take 3 minutes out and just, give us some advice on that.
Yeah, I wish I had great advice. My only real encouragement is that unlearning some of these things takes time, and that we need to be sort of patient and gracious with ourselves as we undo some of the trauma that's been caused by religion. And I would call that trauma when you have like an irrational fear of something that was put there by an idea that you don't believe in anymore. That takes time to undo. I would say to focus on, for me, what I did was I focused on the fact that I believed that God was loving and compassionate, which was incompatible in my mind with burning people forever. And so I said to myself, even if there is a God and I'm wrong, say I'm an atheist and I'm wrong, there is actually a God. I think the overwhelming evidence from my understanding of the Bible is that God is loving and compassionate and wants to save as many people as possible. That was my theology. I didn't think God was eager to send anybody to hell. He would only send people to hell, literally, that stood in front of his face and said, "I don't want to come to your heaven." And he would say, "All right, I guess you have to go away then." And then, like you said, in Adventism, we didn't believe in it. We believed in hell as an event. There would be this fire, it would consume everything, and then it would be over. But I think that we have to unwire some of that wiring and start thinking of ourselves as people that are worth love and acceptance, and to see our world as temporary, and that's okay. I wrote a blog post a year or so ago about that, where I said, it finally dawned on me that I was not entitled to eternal life. I was entitled to one life like everybody else. And once I sort of internalized that idea that this is the one life that I get, I'm not being cheated by the fact that I don't get eternal life. Everybody gets this one life, and then I die and I make room for somebody else to live, which is, I think, a generosity in a way. Like, I use up these resources, this air, this land, and then I go away so that somebody else can share this land and this air and whatever else. And so, I mean, I think that fear of hell is maybe one of the most evil things that religion has given to people. Sometimes it might take, therapy with a professional, and there's certainly no shame in that. I've spent years in therapy for a number of different issues in my life, and it's a way of taking care of your mind the way you would take care of your body. And I think anybody that's struggling with that kind of debilitating fear should definitely get professional assistance with sorting it out. That would be my advice.
Well, we do have to wrap it up. We have about 2 minutes to just talk about, you can plug your blog or anything else that you'd like somebody to look at that you believe that they should be looking at. And then you can stay after the show if you'd like to talk to us a little bit more. If you need to run off to Mother's Day events, then that's perfectly fine too. So do you have something to plug?
Yeah, sure. Like, I mean, you mentioned my blog, which is yearwithoutgod.com, and I haven't been as active on it lately because I've been traveling a lot and speaking at different conferences. But it's there, and there's a lot of if anybody's new to this, you can go back and see sort of my process. There's also a film. The final title is not figured out yet, but the website for the film is yearwithoutgodfilm.com. And there's a trailer there, some teasers, and some information, and that's currently in the editing process. So we hope to have that documentary will be finished by the end of the year, and then looking forward to engaging in conversations with folks around the documentary version of the story. So check that out. You can follow me on Twitter at yearwithoutgod, or my name, Ryan J. Bell. I have 2 accounts there. And my Facebook Year Without God page is just facebook.com/yearwithoutgod.
Cool. All right. So we're just about to wrap up. And if anybody who's viewing wants to go ahead and take a look at us next week, we're always live at Sundays at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Ustream, or if you're local, channel 36. Again, we do have a YouTube channel, Road to Reason TV.
All people, thank you very much for coming on to the show.
Yeah, and thank you again, Ryan, for coming on.
Yeah, it was a great experience. I really appreciated talking to you guys. Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, happy Mother's Day.
Feliz Día de la Madre. Bye.
I know.
Oh, we're supposed to be keeping going.
Yeah, we still have 20 minutes.
We have 20 seconds.
Yeah.
All right.
I was too efficient at the time.